Well, we're lucky enough to be joined by a man whose influence on football in Geelong has been massive for the best part of 50 years. First as a dashing woman for the Cats in 240-odd games from 1974 to 1988. A stint, of course, as captain coach of the Werribee Football Club, football director at Barwon Heads when they won a premiership in 1993. But his lasting legacy on the game of Australian rules football will be as the talent manager, first regional manager, then talent manager for the Geelong Falcons for a quarter of a century. I do speak of MT9, Michael Turner, who's been good enough to join us on our Zoom chat on krockfootball.com.au. Hello, Michael.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Tommy. How are you, son?
Very, very well. Has it hit you yet that your journey in football, as it's been for the last quarter of a century, is completed?
I think it's been a bit easier this year because of COVID. I think we've all had to adjust. I always never thought that I could completely retire. But COVID taught me living in Lawn, as long as you've got some freedoms, you can see the grandkids, you can see your own kids. And, I've got other interests. Obviously, I was heavily involved in football, but I've got other interests. And luckily, my wife and I, Karen, get on very well together and we can do a lot of things together. So COVID eased me into it. And, in the end, the decision was relatively easy because, the NAB leagues and the AFL are going through a major restructure, as AFL clubs are. So, after 25 years and the fact that I'm 65, coming up 66, I knew my time was coming to an end. And look, I even had as we were going through the AFL reset process, I obviously spoke to my manager, Lee Fraser, and the Australian talent manager, Tristan Solder, and Stephen Hocking was good enough to take a phone call from me and just talked our way through it. And, what I basically said, look, I want to go out on a high. I want to go out positive. When I left Geelong, it was a bit, bittersweet in a lot of ways because, when I ended my career at Geelong, I started with John Devine as captain and he obviously sacked me as captain and I finished my career on a bit of a bittersweet. And then I went through certain, like most ex-AFL players, you want to work for your local, your own AFL club. And, I went for quite a few jobs there. I was interviewed for the coaching job twice and the footy ops manager's job a couple of times and missed out. So I was a bit, not blaming Geelong or anything like that. I was a little bit bittersweet at the end with that. And, in the end, I finally made the decision, look, I just got to move on. And not that I didn't concentrate on what I was doing, but, just live in reality and say, well, look, this is my job. And that's where it's at. So, I was really keen at the end of my career, as I said to Stephen Hocking, to go out on a positive and, not look forward, but celebrate what the Falcons and the staff and we have achieved. And I didn't want to stand in the road of some younger person than I, having a role in football, because as you know, there's a lot of people at the AFL and particularly AFL clubs losing their jobs. And lo and behold, it's turned out that someone like that, Tommy Lonergan, has got the job, which is really good.
Would 20 of 20 have been your last year, Mick?
Look, it was an interesting year. I was in two minds because, because of COVID and the Falcons shutting down. I mean, we had everything up and going. We were training at Deakin with the 18s. The 16s are training at Highton Reserve. And the girls had already completed 2 rounds, and we relocated them with Brendan McCartney and Bree Beckley out to Western Heights Secondary College, where the Alex Rance Academy is going to be, and Brendan McCartney's player coach is going to be, and the Geelong Basketball Club hopefully will build a new showpiece stadium out there. So we're all set up, and the girls had played 2 or 3 rounds, and lo and behold, the Monday when we're doing rehab before our first game, it shut down. So and within a week, all the AFL staff had been stood down. So it was quite interesting, and we still kept supporting our players with programs and Zoom conferences and everything we could possibly do. I mean, the staff were fantastic, but we hope to get it up and going again. But when the second wave hit Melbourne, that really destroyed it, because they were going to start the comp up at the end of the year. We had a start date of August the 3rd, and when the second wave hit Melbourne, well, obviously with health restrictions, but we couldn't do it. It was going to be a bit of a free hit for the players. We might have played 5 or 6 games in the final, best country team versus Metro team, but Metro got shut down, and then the country was still going to go ahead, but then Dandenong couldn't play in it because they're in Metro. The Gippsland Power, certain sections of their area was affected. Murray and Bendigo were affected across the border in New South Wales. I think Ballarat and us were the only two clubs that weren't, affected in some way. So, unfortunately, it was shut down. And I had two thoughts. Part of me wanted to get the program up and going again, and the other part was to see what evolved through the AFL. And and in the end, the decision was relatively easy.
Have you been overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and respect for what you've done for the last 25 years, Mick? You've former players, current AFL players, former players of the Falcons, former staff members, all the way up the chain have gone on social media since it became known and public that you wouldn't be in the role beyond this year. What's that meant to you?
Well, I think a lot of people tell lies when people retire, and they tell a lot of lies when people at funerals. Kingy, I've always said that. You go to a lot of funerals, and lo and behold, the person's been a saint, and you know very well he hasn't been, or she hasn't been. So look, it's really quite. Look, honestly, it's quite humbling, really. I mean, I'm in my position. I know it can be quite hard sometimes. I'm honest, and sometimes I'm very brutally honest, and that can be with a staff member or a player, or even a parent if they need pulling into line. So, some people, there would be people out there that weren't completely happy with Michael Turner, but all I can be as a person is be, completely honest with people. I don't network. I don't play games. I'm not a politician. I just try and, our mantra at the Falcons is to allow our staff, and particularly the players, to reach their full potential. And that's never changed. And we say the same thing every year. I mean, when you're looking at 100 boys and 50 girls, starting training each year, they've all got the dream of playing AFL. That's why they're there, and we're to help them. But I just say to them, look, you're here to reach your full potential. And we've got banners down at the club of Luke Hodge and Travis Boak and Paddy Dangerfield and Gary Ablett as I'm speaking, right behind me. And I just said, look, you're here to reach your full potential. Not everyone can be Gary Ablett. Not everyone can be Luke Hodge. You can just be the best you can be, and we'll try and help you, on and off the field. And that's one of the things that I was really pleased with in that video that was done by Jesse Drever, was that, the people who contributed, like Jonathan Brown, who's been an AFL champion, it was just as good to get a message from Michael Sotomaco, who's the captain of Werribee, and Dom Gleeson, who's was the captain of Werribee, captain of Geelong, and now coaches Torquay, or the number of players that have played local football, like Cooper Stevens, who never got drafted, and this is the first Cooper Stevens that came through, and he's playing great local football. So that's the most pleasing thing for me.
I want to take you back. What are your memories of taking over from Paul Armstrong, and I suppose how it's all evolved over 25 years? Had you got to Highton by 95, or were you still, for the while there, the office was located down at the Cats with the Falcons?
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a story. I mean, when they started the program after the under-19s were finished, Ken Gannon, David Code, who did Vic Country, Mick Danaher, who did Vic Metro, Curly Austin, who ended up at the AFL, and Kevin Sheen, and a few other people based at the MCG, started the competition up. And I mean, they ran a competition with 4 or 5, 6 people that would now be run by 50 people. But look, they did a fantastic job. Ken Gannon is a very, very good operator. I mean, I remember starting at Geelong with Ken, and I was a player, a pretty rowdy player in the social club, and Ken was assistant bar manager, putting himself through the Gordon in accountancy, and then ended up bar manager and worked his way up, was CEO of Geelong, was CEO of AFL Victoria, and had a very, very big job, infrastructure job at the AFL. Like Ken's a smart fella. So they got the competition up and running, but because of the rush, Paul Armstrong and Terry Bright obviously got the first 3 years going. The first year they were combined with Ballarat and won the premiership, and then as the competition evolved, more teams came in. So when I came in, there were 12 teams, and we were based at Cardinia Park. You could just sense that Geelong, because we were a separate entity and our players could be drafted to any AFL club, and they were expanding, they wanted us out of there. They were really good. We had our own, they got us out of the building for a start, out of portable down near the front gate, and we trained on the rugby oval out the back. So, Geelong were really good to us, but you could see it was evolving that way. Now, we eventually were told we had to vacate Cardinia Park, and lo and behold, where are you going to go? So we were looking everywhere. It's quite an amazing story. Stuart Fox at that time was working for the City of Greater Geelong, We started looking for grounds, and we drove out to Highton Reserve, and he said, well, how does this look? And, I remember Highton Reserve as the ground where, Bowen played. And I'd even been in the social club there, obviously, a couple of times, a couple of their discos or nightclubs or whatever it is. So, but it was in complete disarray, like it was a mess. But look, with Stuart Fox's help, with the AFL Victoria's help, and the City of Greater Geelong, what normally happens with funding is that if you get say $250,000 from the AFL, the council will match it, and then you'll be able to do a refurbishment. So we did a $500,000 refurbishment. AFL Barn, which was then just Football Geelong, David Matthews run that.
Yep.
And he asked if he could get involved as well and get an office there. So I think they put in 25 grand. So anyhow, the first stage of Highton Reserve was done. So away we went. We had to share it with the Alexander Thompson Cricket Club, and then it just evolved. So at the moment you've got AFL Barwon there, the AFL Geelong Falcons and Alexander Thompson Cricket Club there in the summer, and lo and behold, Stuart Fox goes on. He becomes one of the operations managers at the Geelong Football Club. Becomes CEO of Hawthorn, and now he's the CEO of the MCC. So Stuart's done really well, and it's just amazing how people go on. I stayed at the Falcons for 25 years, and these blokes got multi-million-dollar jobs, Kingy. But even David Matthews moved on very quickly. I went referee for him, and he got a job at Vic Country as football ops manager. Then he was AFL Auskick manager. Yep. And then, of course, he became on the executive of the AFL. So at one stage there, one of the stage developments they were doing at Cardinia Park or GMHBA Stadium, I think the question was posed to the Geelong Football Club and Brian Cook. We're going to give you some money to refurbish GMHBA Stadium, but we want some of that money spent on local football, particularly, the talent pathway. Yep. So look, they had some negotiations, and David was able to get some money for us, about another $500,000 to do another big extension at Highton Reserve, and then the council came on board and matched that, and people put in money, and we did about a $1.2 million renovation at Highton. So, so that's up to 1.7, and other things have been done. So there's probably been about $2 million spent there over the course of me there. New lights went up a couple of years ago when the old wooden ones were condemned by the council. But, the AFL, certainly the council have been very good. But, look, funding's very difficult. I mean, and Brian Cook and everyone goes through it. You're chasing politicians all the time. I think if Andrew Katos had been able to get into power with the Liberal Party at the right time, he was very keen on spending even more money there. And, you end up chasing. You've got to get the ducks lined up. I mean, if the Labor government are in and Andrew Katos is a sitting member, you're not going to get any money because Andrew Katos can't get any money from the Labor government. Yep. And the same thing happens when we're going through a period of doing infrastructure development. Sarah Henderson was a sitting member, but couldn't do a lot because the Labor Party were in government at that stage. With the Labor Prime Ministers and the Labor government. So you're talking to politicians all the time, the councils and the AFL, and what you've got to do is try and get the three together to do a major refurbishment. But look, in the end, Highton Reserve's a great hub. It's a good training base. Like Geelong, we were very, very lucky that Deakin University did a major restructure development or infrastructure development out there. So we train out at Deakin a fair bit. Yep. And just recently, as I said, the girls have gone to Western Heights Secondary College. So you've just got to use the facilities available to you and make it work. And as an administrative training base, I think Highton Reserve is worked out fantastically well.
You're disappointed that the Geelong Falcons haven't played as much footy in Geelong as they should have in recent years, Mick?
Well, the GMHBA Stadium rebuild's been fantastic. There's no doubt about it. It's a fantastic stadium. I think there's been about $200 million spent there. And like all these things, they're always through politicians, people within the Geelong Football Club. It's always viewed as a community facility. And look, it is a community facility. There's no doubt that Geelong do a great job with their community hub down there and all the people that roll through the place. But look, it is still an elite training and playing centre. And, everyone that goes to GMHBA Stadium, when you walk in, you're paying to walk in, aren't you, King? I mean, you're paying for your seat, you're paying to get into the place. Not the unfortunate thing, when the Falcons do play there, there's no way of us making any money. The only thing we do is we used to sell some records and make $100 or $200. We don't run the canteen. We don't run the beverages.
Yep.
And in the early days, it wasn't super expensive, but with the trust taking over, and this is no criticism of anyone, it's just the way it is.
Yep.
There are administrative costs, when you open up the stadium. So it used to be $1,000, and I've negotiated a few times, and it's something like $4,000 now. So, and when the Geelong Football Club used the ground, it costs a lot of money, a lot of money. So. I think to open the stadium for women's girls, and I could be wrong here, something, or an AFL game is something like $100,000. So it's a lot of money. So for us, it's $4,000. So if you play 10 games there, which we'd love to, it's $40,000. Well, the budget just can't handle that. And the other thing, GMHBA Stadium can't handle it. It's an elite facility for Geelong, and that's fair enough. They've got to train there and they've got to play there. So the ground's got to be in good nick. So the only time you can really play there is at the start of the year. Yep. And maybe squeeze a game in at the end of the year. But with finals coming, that's difficult. And now that you've got AFL men's and women's and VFL men's and women's, that's where the hub is for that. So, I'm comfortable with that. We've been lucky in the fact that, as I said, Deacon's come on board. We've played games out there. They need to build a pavilion out there. And if they did do that, we'd play home games there. But with what's happened with COVID and the funding towards universities, I can't see that happening in the short term now. But Colac Football Club did up their ground. So that's a really good facility for us. And, of course, you've got Mars Stadium at Ballarat. And what the mantra is of the AFL is that we play on the best grounds we possibly can. So the AFL recruiters can see players playing on big grounds. So, it's just, look, there are a lot of challenges when you're running any club, and you've just got to meet those challenges and try and get the best possible outcome you can for everybody.
Mick, I'm going to pick your brain on some topics here to do with the Falcons. You got a favourite story from your time? Is there one that you like to relate about the club to people and what the club is to the Geelong and Colac region?
There's a lot of stories that I could tell. I think when we first started, there was a bit of a difference between Geelong and the Handham region when we had clubs down at Port Fairy, Croydon, Warple, that sort of thing. Geelong community have always been very supportive, and we've basically had no pushback at all from local clubs. Look, I understand local clubs, they've developed their juniors, and then the elite ones come into our program as a talent player pathway. But I've explained how that is a benefit to clubs, when the cycle goes all around. When we first got on board, there was a lot of pushback from, particularly the Handham League clubs. I'm not saying Colac, but clubs down deep around Warrnambool or Croydon or Port Fairy found it very hard to get around their head that players were coming into a program like ours and not playing for their local club, particularly in the seniors. So, I still remember officials saying to me, "Look, they're our players. You can't take our players. They're our players." I said, "Well, no, they've come to your club because they live in the community and they play at your club. And just like everybody in life, including you, the person who's talking to me, they've got to have the opportunity to reach their full potential. So this is available to them. It's available in gymnastics, athletics, cricket, and now it's available in football." So, some officials were pretty difficult to deal with. Others were very supportive, and the program evolved. And I mean, there's no pushback at all now because people understand what the system is. But early days it was quite hard, and I think it's still quite hard in some of the big country regions like Bendigo when they're dealing with bringing players down from Mildura and Shepparton and all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting. But look, there's a million stories you can tell them. You don't want to implicate anyone. Look, it's been pretty there's the Luke Hodge stories of he was a Colac boy, and he loved being a country boy in Colac. And Colac's probably one of the most successful country towns in Australia producing elite athletes, whether they be cricketers or footballers. It's just amazing how many footballers and cricketers have come out in Colac. It's probably because there's nothing else to do in Colac except play football and cricket, maybe chase a few girls around at school. So, it's just been quite amazing. But Luke was a real lad, and he loved his cricket. There's legendary stories here in Lawn that he played here and whack sixes all over the place. And obviously, he was just a really elite footballer, but he wanted to do everything, and he also wanted to have fun with his mates. So there's many times that I would spend time with Luke, which you can't do these days, one-on-one in the property steward's room, telling him, what day it was and what he needed to do to improve. And he would admit himself he wasn't. He was a very talented player, but he wasn't the most professional person at his age. And that hurt him when he went to Collingwood because he wanted to do everything. When he went to Hawthorn, as the number 1 draft pick, it hurt him because when he went to Hawthorn, he went there injured. He had really crook groins because he wouldn't listen. He just wanted to keep playing footy all the time. And it took him, 2 or 3 years to justify his number 1 mantle. I can still remember going to Hawthorn with Damien Christian, our coach, and we walked in and John Hook was there and Peter Swab and all the recruiting staff were there, and they had 3 names written on the board. They had Chris Judd, Luke Ball and Luke Hodge. And we had to talk about what the strengths were of Luke Hodge. And we spoke about him. We spoke about Chris Judd. Chris Judd was top age. He'd just done his shoulder in the national championships and was coming off a pretty big shoulder injury. But obviously was a great player. Luke Ball was 17. He was going to spend the next year still in the competition, and he was going to be, I think you could draft 17s, that's right. Yep. He would have been at school at Xavier. So he was going to get drafted also, but he would have spent the year at Xavier College, which he was dedicated to. And of course, you had Luke Hodges, a 17-year-old. So in the end, we spoke about it, and I said to Hawthorn, look, what sort of player do you need at Hawthorn when you're looking at these players? And they said, look, Mick, to be honest, we need someone who can play in the midfield, and we need someone who can go forward and kick goals for us, and we need someone, if we can, to go back and shore us up. I get a bit emotional talking about it, actually. It's a good story.
I thought you were choking up there, Michael.
Yeah, so it's quite amazing, really, because I'm always very honest with recruiters, and I think I back my judgment well, and I think I can pick a player and tell them what their strengths are. And there's Paddy Dangerfield stories and Jonathan Brown stories as well. But in the end, Luke Hodge was. We didn't know at the time he was their pick, and I remember going to the draft because Jimmy Bartell came with us also, and they both got drafted very early, and they took Luke Hodge. Now Chris Judd came out of the blocks, and even Luke Ball to a certain extent, and Hodgie, it took a couple of years to get going, but in the end, when you remember what he was like at Hawthorn, he's a 4 premiership player, he's a premiership captain, he's a dual Norm Smith medalist. The only thing he didn't win was the Brownlow, and I can still remember watching him, in that game specifically when he got the ball on the boundary line at the northern end of the MCG on his left foot. He was able to kick that swinging goal through
against the Eagles.
Yeah, against the Eagles, and put his hands up. Those sort of things are very, very special, and they stick in my mind. And you just go, well, look, great players do great things in big games to win finals. So he achieved his full potential, and he's just a great player. But you can talk about Jonathan Van, you can talk about a whole range of players, Cameron Ling. They've all got stories to them and that. But I just get a real joy and an emotional joy, I suppose, out of the fact that when you declare someone and you think someone's a really good player, that they actually achieve it. And I think when I look back, and without trying to be smart about it, I think the players, when I talk to recruiters that I've declared, they all basically, they have become great players. And for some reason, the Falcons not only have had a lot of players drafted, but our players, it's one thing to be drafted, then you've got to actually play, but then you've got to become a regular, senior AFL player and a champion. And for some reason, the club, and it's down to the player in the end. I ask players all the time, and they'll tell you when I'm talking to them one-on-one, I say, who's going to get you drafted? And some kids will say, oh, well, you will, Mick, or the high performance manager or the coach or whatever. And they've heard me say it that many times at the Falcons, that when I ask players now, who's going to get you drafted, they just say, I'm the only person who can get me drafted. That's a player, because they've got to listen, learn, improve, and work really hard to get themselves better. So, it's really gratifying watching players develop and watching them on the TV and playing AFL and reaching that full potential. And as I said before, those players get a lot of publicity, but there's also the VFL and local players. I mean, last year when St Mary's played Colac in that great grand final, I counted up all the time. I think there were 32 players in that game that had been through the Falcons program, and that gives you just as much joy. So, it's all about that.
Yep. If I had to ask you for your number one, who is it? Can you do that, or is that too hard a question?
Well, the way I basically answer it, and I've said it before, is that I don't judge them on their AFL careers. I judge them when they're at the Falcons, okay? So people improve a lot when they leave. And there's reasons for that. The local clubs develop them. We get them to a certain stage, and we get them to a much higher stage now than we did, say, 20 years or 10 years ago because of the staff we've got. So, what you want, in the past, I reckon when a player got drafted, there was about that much gap between what we were doing and AFL clubs are doing. But now that gap is really narrowed. So James Warple, when he gets drafted, or Sam Walsh, because they've got great ability, that gap's really narrow now, so that when they go to AFL clubs, they're educated. So it's their strength and conditioning. They've obviously got to get stronger and grow, but their skill acquisition, their knowledge of the game, the knowledge of the technology with champion data and the computers and everything we do. It's not just about ability; it's about all the things that go towards making an AFL player. And I ask the players all the time when they come back, what's the difference between Carlton Football Club and the Geelong Falcons? They said, well, nothing, except the fact that we're full-time professionals, and obviously the facilities are a lot more elite. Or if I ask Cooper Stevens down at Geelong at the moment, it'd be the same thing. So it's all about all that preparation and those sort of things. So I got a little bit off track there, Kingy. So
that's all right.
What was the first bit you asked me?
who was your number one? Who's the best junior?
The best junior we had was again Luke Hodge, and that's what I was leading up to. Matthew Scarlett, when he left, was a really good player, but he improved dramatically when he left. He grew and he developed at Geelong. He became a lot more professional. Gary Ablett, people will say, well, what about Gary Ablett? Well, Gary Ablett played for us as a 17-year-old. He was quite small, and he developed a lot when we left. Remember, he spent 3 or 4 years in the VFL before he played for Geelong. Jimmy Bartell was a great player, but also spent a fair bit of time in the VFL. And Jonathan Brown was a great player. But after Jonathan Brown left, he grew and he really improved his running, his endurance, and all those sorts of things. But in pure talent, as a junior, Luke Hodge, I still remember Alan Thompson, our development manager. We were down at not long after I just started. There was a game at the Western Bulldogs home ground for our under-15s, and we had a Geelong under-15s and a Handham region under-15s. And Alan Thompson said to me, that kid out there is going to be a really good player. I think he'll play league footy, he'll be a champion. I said, who's that? And he said, I didn't take much notice at this time because there's that many kids running around. He said, it's Luke Hodge. I said, okay. So he developed that year, and in his 16th year, I wasn't keen on bringing 16-year-olds in to play in the competition. Because there was a player called Glenn Hanegraaff a few years before he'd come in as a 15-year-old from Colac, and I think he holds the games record at the Falcons of some ridiculous number. But not saying he was burnt out, but the recruiters probably had seen too much of him by the time he was 18. So anyhow, when Hodgie turned 16, his local club, Colac Imps, and I hope I haven't got that right, it wasn't South Colac, it was Colac Imps, they were starting to play him in the seniors, and I said, look, do we really want a 16-year-old kid playing in the seniors? Would he be better in our program? And then Colac got hold of him and went to the under-18s, and I'm pretty sure he played some games for Colac in the seniors, from memory. I could be wrong. So I just said to our staff, look, we need to bring this kid in and start playing him and look after him in the comp and let the recruiters have a good look at him because he get drafted the next year. So he came in the year 2000, and that was the year we won the premiership. With players like Dom Gleeson and kids like Paul Sullivan and a lot of great local players. We didn't have a star-studded team. We just had a really, really good team. We had some great young players like Bartell and Hodge and those sorts of players. And look, he came into and Eamon Buchanan, who had a great final series as well. But he just came to that final series as a 16-year-old, and he played half forward flank. He was kicking goals over his head. Yeah. And as a 17-year-old, look, he pushed himself pretty hard. He was in the AIS. He was in Vic Country. I think he snuck a couple of local games. He was playing with us. And by the end of the season, we had a super team in 2001. We should have won the premiership. And we got into the preliminary final, and he was playing a bit sore with his groin on ball. And I think at one stage we were 42 points down, and with about 5 minutes to go in the last quarter, we were, I think, 10 points or 8 points down and had a shot on goal and probably should have won the game and gone on and won the premiership and got beaten in the preliminary final. But as a 16, 17-year-old, at that age, at the Falcons level, he was the most talented player I'd ever seen. And that's not saying that other players weren't as well, because, there's been some, Jimmy Bartell was a great player at that age as well, but that's just the way it is.
Have you got a player that got drafted that you thought, gee, you're not lucky to have been drafted, but, might have just fallen into a draft and got onto an AFL list, but went on and made something of themselves? Is there one player that sticks out for you that you go, gee, I'm glad he went on and had a good career?
Yeah, well, Cameron Ling's the biggest one, and probably Luke Dalhouse is the other. I told him some lies in his draft year, Luke, about certain things that he knows about. But look, Cameron Ling, you've got to think about the era. Back in Cameron Ling's era, everyone wanted athletic players, and there's a lot of players that got drafted back in the era who were great athletes, but they weren't great footballers. Cameron Ling was a great footballer, and he was becoming a better athlete. And again, he improved dramatically after he left us, because he went to a professional football club. So if players leave with the right attitude and the right work ethic, they will improve dramatically. So Cameron Ling was playing with us as a full forward as a 17-year-old, and he was the big country full forward, but he wasn't a big full forward. No. And he wasn't athletic, and he probably looked a bit podgy. He'd even say that. And as a 17-year-old, he didn't get drafted, which he was, really disappointed about. And he came back as an 18-year-old. And look, he might dispute this a little bit, but I still can remember us having the conversation. He said, Ling, he had long sort of red hair, or longish sort of red hair. And I said, look, Linger, we've got to make you look more athletic. You need to get your hair cut like short back and sides, because it'll make you look taller. We made sure he got a pair of Larry Donoghue type pair of shorts, like a bigger pair of shorts, so they didn't look tight on his, because he had big, strong legs, and when you're running around with really tight shorts and your socks down. So we got him a bigger pair of shorts and got his mother or a tailor. They got a tailor to cut them up higher to make his legs look longer, and told him to play with his socks pulled up, so he looked more athletic. But the most important thing we did that year is we took him out of full forward and we played him on ball. We played him centre half back, a bit forward, so he kicked goals, but he played us a non-baller. And he showed a few more tricks. Now, I was really worried going into that draft, and he deserved to get drafted, but he wouldn't get drafted. And that was about the same time that Brian Cook became CEO of the Geelong Football Club. And I'm sure the club were trying to get a local base there.
Yep.
You still want to draft the best players, but they wanted to get a local base. And they were building on that with the Gary Abletts and the Jimmy Bartells after that, and the Cameron Lings. But Cameron Ling, I think, was probably one of the first local prodigies you'd say that Geelong drafted, and they took a bit of a punt with him. I think his beak test was 13.2 or 13.5, but as his career went on, his beak test went into the 16s. Like he pushed himself, because Cameron Ling had a great attitude and pushed himself. He became an elite AFL player, number one as a tagger, but then as a premiership captain and a triple premiership player. Like, just an amazing story. And he was someone who really, outside Geelong, I was really worried at the time how many clubs, you can sort of get a gauge of, when clubs are interested in players with the draft, that how many clubs are actually interested in him. So I was really worried he was going to miss, and he didn't miss, and he's had a magnificent AFL career.
Who was a player that was wrong place, wrong time, in terms of they had all the attributes, but they got overlooked for whatever reason, that at the time they weren't the style of footballer being taken, or that they did get on a list, but it just didn't work out for them? Is there somebody that you look back and go, gee, I would have picked him when he rolled up, that he was going to have a league career?
I reckon Dom Gleeson was, if I was just going to pick one, I reckon Dom Gleeson was pretty unlucky. And Dom came through that year in 2000 as well, when they were looking for, really athletic players. And many of those failed. Look, unfortunately for Dom, he was a midfielder, and the taller you get, the more chance, if you've got ability, of getting drafted. So, let's say Henry Walsh this year in the draft, Sam Walsh's brother, he's 200 centimetres, 203 centimetres. Like, there's not many 203 centimetres players running around, that are Sam Walsh's brother, and has got good skills, and also he's aggressive. So he's got a great chance of getting drafted. But the smaller you get, and you've got to remember the players that have been passed over, there's a million midfielders out there. You know what I mean? So you're competing against a much bigger group of players. But the 2000 premiership that we played in, two great players played in it in the midfield. Now, Dom Gleeson played for us, and Mitchell, who went on to be Hawthorn's captain, played for the Eastern Rangers, okay? Sam Mitchell.
Yep.
Now, both didn't get drafted. Dom Gleeson missed the draft. Sam Mitchell missed the draft, and then Sam Mitchell was eventually picked up, from memory, from Box Hill, wasn't he, Kingy?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, and Dom went on with his career too. So, and they were very, very similar players. But because they were smaller midfielders who weren't super quick, you know, one got drafted, one didn't. So I compare at the same time. Dom Gleeson, in my book, was as good a player as Sam Mitchell. Sam Mitchell went to Box Hill and got drafted. I'm not sure what Dom did after his draft year of that's 2000. I'm not sure whether he went straight to Werribee or played some games
might have gone to Carlton, I think. I think he might have played some VFL at Carlton.
Might have gone to Carlton or something like that, yeah. So it's just, it's opportunity. And look, he still had a great career at Werribee, had a great career at Geelong, and now he's a fantastic coach. So I've heard him speak, and the way he runs things, he's done a really good job at Torquay. So it's just one of those sliding doors moments. But yeah, I thought Dom was, and there's been others. There's a kid running around at the moment called Jack Henderson, who played for Geelong College and us in the premiership year, that I wanted to bring back as a 19-year-old. And I had to make a choice between Braden Ham and Jack Henderson. And, you know, we couldn't have them both. And we picked Braden Ham, who got drafted to Essendon, which was great for us and great for Braden. But Jack missed out. But I know Jack's played really well at Werribee, and he's over in South Australia at the moment, you know, absolutely killing them. So he's another one. Jimmy Allen's another one. You know, Jimmy Allen from Lara.
Yep.
You know, is it double? Did he win 2 Magarys?
I think he won 3.
3 Magary medals. I mean, that puts him in the Russell Ebert. He should be in the AFL Hall of Fame, shouldn't he? 3 Magary medals.
Yep.
Hey, great. You know, he's like, you know, it's South Australian football. He's won 3 Magary medals. He's been a great player, Jimmy. But unfortunately for Jimmy, he played really well as a 17-year-old and then did his knee as an 18-year-old, from memory. So he's coming off an ACL. Geelong took him as a rookie. He lasted there a year and went to South Australia, where he still is. But he's won 3 Magary medals. You'd think he was capable of playing. But again, a small player, medium paced. So you're overlooked. But, you know, he's still, you know, there's 5 things that players get drafted on. One's attitude. Okay, so Jimmy Allen and Dom Gleeson, they've all got great attitudes. They can all win the football. They're great decision makers. They're great users of the ball. So they've got the skills, hand and foot, to deliver the ball. You know, you don't have the ball being turned over. The 5th most important thing is, you know, is the physical attributes, the athleticism of the player. So, you know, when you're testing someone like a Sam Walsh, and he's really quick and he's got a 16 beat, he's got speed and endurance. Now, what probably hurt those players is that they were pretty good endurance runners, but they just lacked a bit of pace, and it went against them. But Luke Hodge was also not a quick player. But what those players are is that they're smart in the head and they can read the play. So they might be standing on a really quick player, but they'll go first because they know where the ball's going. So they're away before the ball comes down there. So that's the thing that AFL recruiters have got to get their heads around, and sometimes they're just not prepared to take the risk.
Do you still shake your head that James Warple was still available at the pick he was?
Well, it's a worry because, you know, if AFL clubs reduce their lists, which they're talking about, to 42, there's less draft picks. He's not going to get drafted at pick 46. Is that where he went, 46?
Yeah, somewhere in that vicinity.
And Brian Wise was about 42, wasn't he?
Well, I think Brian might have been in the 50s. Was
he 50? Yeah, I thought Brian might have gone before James. But yeah, that's, again, you know, it's all about that opportunity. Yeah, look, but yeah, I speak to other clubs, and yeah, it's a very complicated thing, the draft. I know other clubs like Richmond and that were interested in him, and you know, they just, it came to a situation where they might have had pick, and I think I spoke to James about this. I think they might have had pick 22 or something like that, and they decided because of their list management issues that they needed to go for a tour rather than another midfielder. And then Warps drifted out to 46. Now, I get very nervous before the draft, and I watch it on the TV, and I was really, you know, my stomach was churning that night, that, you know, thinking that he might miss. And then he gets drafted to Hawthorn and wins the best and fairest in his second year, doesn't he? So yep. He's a future AFL captain. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, it's always and again, you know, sometimes players get marked really hard, especially the good ones. They expect them to be Superman. And I won't mention the AFL club because it's quite a good story, but what happens in the draft is that at the start of the year, the AFL clubs all come around, or most of them do. Some don't. But if there's 18 AFL clubs, you talk to at least 15 or 16 clubs at the start of the year. And Dean Pearce and I and Luke Daffy, our coaches, you present your group of players and you've got them marked. Definitely get drafted. Like Sam Walsh, when he came through, definitely get drafted. Then you'll have other kids that, they're a good chance. He's a rookie. Keep your eye on these kids because we think they're going to develop into a good player sort of thing. At the end of the year, when the AFL recruiters come back, because they're really refined what they're after, and it depends on the list and who they've cut from their club. So let's say North Melbourne at the moment, they're looking for every sort of player, aren't they? Because they've just sacked about 15. But most clubs, don't go to that extent. So at the end of the season, what we normally do, you've still got your list of players and you've got your opinions on them. And some players might have dropped off a bit. Some players might have got injured. Some players, like a Braden Ham, really comes on, really late. But the AFL players, I just let the AFL players talk to you about who they want to talk to, because they might want a taller or centre-half forward. And by doing that, you get a bit of a gauge on who you think might get drafted. It gives you a bit more confidence. Now, in the James Warple one, I spoke to a lot of AFL clubs about him, but one club in particular, like we got to the end of the interview, and I'm not going to embarrass them. We got to the end of the interview and they said, have we missed anyone? And I said, missed anyone? I said, that's an insult to the club, an insult to me, and that's an insult to James Warple, because you haven't even asked me one question about him. Now, he's All-Australian. He's the Vic Country most valuable player. He's our captain, a premiership captain, and, in my opinion, he's going to get drafted. Oh, no, we're not interested in James Warple. We don't like the way he played. Now, that's the sort of things that happen. So as the draft falls, and that club's got to pick at a really crucial time, and they don't take James Warple, he misses, doesn't he? So, look, in the end, people ask this question like, does anyone really get missed? Look, I think in general, 90% of the time, the AFL clubs do get it right. They might miss the odd one. And I say to those players, if you really want to stay in the system, you've got to go and play state footy, whether it's in the VFL or the SANFL or the Waffle, and give yourself a second chance. And luckily, for players like Tommy Stewart and Tommy Atkins, that's exactly what's happened, and even Nick Maxwell. Nick Maxwell, when he came through with us, he played with us and he was a great player, but he had really bad osteopubis when he played with us as an 18-year-old, and he went to Ballarat and he went to uni up there and played with North Ballarat and got drafted for them. So you've got to stay in the system. So there's quite a number of our players that we, tag as draftable players that went on and got drafted from other clubs because they stayed in the system. So, with Tom Stewart, again, sliding doors again. Tommy Stewart was a good player with us, but he just didn't have the right attitude. And he would say that himself. And I remember a pre-season, he went on a holiday to Bali, or it might have been even in season with his dad, and we were mortified. He wasn't ready at that age. And then, Tommy Stewart could have really fallen out of the system quite easy, couldn't he? And if Matty Scarlett wasn't at South Barwon and saw his talent and brought him down to Geelong VFL, and then, he's in the Geelong and he's an All-Australian, he misses his chance, doesn't he? He's a local player. So there's all those sliding doors things. But the only two players that haven't been drafted, or three players that haven't basically been drafted from us, from my recollection, and I'll count Nick Maxwell, but, Tommy Stewart, he played with us, but he got drafted basically from South Barwon and Geelong VFL. And the other one we missed was Tommy Atkins. Now, Tommy did a pre-season with us. We made a decision as an 18-year-old that we didn't think he was fully engaged in the program. We had a lot of midfielders. He was going to Geelong College, so he was going to miss half the year, and we didn't put him on our list. Now, I'll categorically say now that we made a mistake, because we should have worked with him. But I think Geelong will even tell you the same thing. He played VFL there, and at some stage he spoke to Geelong and said, look, I think I might go back to St. Joseph's. So he hung in there, and he got drafted, and he's going to play in the final series probably this year. So it's a fantastic story. And, I always put a big emphasis on father and sons. And in Tom's case, I definitely should have put more emphasis on his father, because he was a great local player. He was a pretty controversial local player and did some outlandish things sometimes, but he still played VFA, and he was a great player at St. Joseph's, etc. North Shore
as well.
Did a couple of ordinary things as happened in that era, but he was super tough and he was a great player. So, when you're looking at father and sons, you're obviously looking at the Gary Ablets and the Matthew Scarletts, but you also need to look at their VFL careers.
Mm.
I'll give you an example like Tommy Gribble, who's with us, and his brother. Andrew Gribble was a great, Sandford player and a great local player.
Yep.
And Tommy Atkins, in case I made a mistake there. I should have looked, I should have given more kudos to his dad's career.
Oh, and I think Mick might have even been on Footscray's list at one stage and played either under 19s or reserves at Footscray. So, very handy player. Mick, as much as you love the players, you love your staff, because as much as the players, are the ones that makes the name for the club and the Footy Factory nickname and the like, they come and go. But your staff, and a lot of them have been there since the day you walked through the door in 1995.
Yeah, well, look, if they haven't been there right from the start, they've been there for a long time. So I think Jimmy Melberg's the one that's been there the longest. He's one of our trainers, and he was there. He left for a couple of years for career reasons and came back. But look, all of our staff, you want to develop the players and give them a chance in their careers, and you also want to develop the staff. I mean, most of our coaches have gone on and had careers at AFL clubs, and a lot, high performance staff. Josh Humphries was with us a few years ago. He's a high performance manager at North Melbourne. Dylan is down at Geelong VFL. I hope he's still. I haven't caught up with all the changes that are being made. But a lot of our staff have gone on to AFL clubs, but look, they have been very loyal. So, look, my job is probably no different to, I probably compare it to Brian Cook, like in a professional AFL club. We still deal with a lot of stakeholders. It doesn't matter whether my budget's 500, 600, 700,000 or an AFL club's 70 million. It's just that an AFL club employ full-time staff and we employ part-time staff. I would suggest that at AFL clubs, the staff and the players obviously get more support because it's fully professional. At our club, our staff do a magnificent job on looking after the players on a part-time capacity. So, our staff is always above 50. And they're all paid some sort of an honorarium. And the way I run the club is not unlike an AFL club. We run it on a department basis. So I'm obviously the talent manager or the CEO, just like Brian Cook is. I deal with all the same things. Dean Pearce looks after the footy ops. You've got the coaching department. You have our high performance department, which, there's 5 or 6 people in that. Our medical department, our girls academy, which there'd be at least 10 or 12 staff there, our under-16s, our recruiting department, our volunteers, and our welfare. So there's 10 different departments there. And, in the end, you can't do everything in a club. So the way I've been able to run it, particularly the last 10 years, and it's got better and better, is that I read every email that goes through, but my skills aren't sitting on a computer all day. My skills are my knowledge of football and being able to, I think, attract the best talent I possibly can to the club and hopefully get the best out of them, players and staff working together. So what I normally do is a lot of the stuff, emails that come to me, I flick them to Dean Pearce. Dean does a lot of the football operation stuff. If it's a girls or women's matter, it was going to Bree Beckley or Katie Gerrings, who are running those programs, or Jason Armistead, Brendan McCartney. So you go out to all the department managers, and then I would follow it up that night when I saw them at training, either verbally, not so much on email. Mate, I'd rather follow up verbally so I could look them in the eye and talk to them. So I had an office upstairs at Highton, which I worked in the morning. If I wasn't home here, because you can work from home. And down in the afternoon at Highton, I'd come downstairs at 2 o'clock because I want to interact with the players and the staff. So I had an office downstairs so that you actually talk to people. Yep. But look, our staff have been fantastic. We've got some really, really good staff, and I just hope some of those people get the opportunity to stay there next year. And for the integration of the program and the continuity, and I've got a meeting with Tommy on Friday, or this Friday coming, and also Paul Corrigan, about handing over some stuff and showing Highton Reserve, and we'll go through our staff's organisational structure, and then highlight some people to them that hopefully will stay at the club. And then look, it's up to Tommy and Paul then to take that information and what Dean and I give them, and we'll help them if there's something missing in the puzzle at any time they want to, and they've got to put their own stamp on the program, the same as I did when Paul Armstrong left.
What are you going to do with yourself, Mick?
I always thought I couldn't retire. As I said at the start, COVID has probably taught me that living in Melbourne would be a nightmare. But living in Lawn, look, I've got a good lifestyle in Lawn. I've got a really nice house in Lawn. I surf. I love music. So I spend a lot of time watching YouTube and that sort of stuff. I've got a great wife. We've been together for over 40 years. So we got on really well together and hardly have a crossword or an argument. I've got two really great boys. Levi is in Bowen Heads. He's a director of a business called Ballerine Property. So there's three young blokes in that. So you imagine what it's like on the Ballerine Peninsula and Bowen Heads. So they do really well there. My other son, Che, is a builder in Lawn. And I've got three grandkids. Frankie is a little girl. She's coming up 6 tomorrow. Ziggy's a boy. He's 4. And Raf's a little boy. He's a year old. And my son, who's the builder in Lawn's, building a house in the same street as us down the end to get as far away from us as we possibly can. And he's got a really fantastic partner, as has Levi. Levi's married to Brooke, and Che's going out with the girl Grace, who's from New Zealand. So, I got no doubt they'll end up together and we'll have more grandkids. So, as things open up, I always thought I'd keep working in football, maybe part-time recruiting or consultancy, but because of all the people losing their jobs within the AFL and at the AFL club level, the market's going to be flooded for that sort of stuff. And again, if someone asked me to do something, I'd obviously do it. But I'm probably going to change tack a fair bit. My youngest son, with Levi in real estate, and my son is a builder, I'm probably going to go into some building construction, I think, in Lawn. I think there's a market there for that sort of stuff. So I like building houses, and if you've got a son in real estate and a son who's an actual builder, you can do some projects as an owner builder. So I'll probably go down that path, I think, Kingy.
You haven't knocked on the door of a Lawn Footy Club. Last time you were a football manager at a local club, they won a flag, Mick.
Yeah, well, local footy's great fun. Bowen Heads was fantastic fun in the 90s. We had a really great committee, Brian Andrew and Andy Dietrich and Ricky Barham and myself and a whole range of people. Mick Higgins, who's Sean's dad, coached the club. Jeff Miles coached the club. It was fantastic fun, but local footy's hard work, mate. It is really hard work, and you just get absolutely burnt out. We were one of the few clubs back in those days that employed an administrator, Clive West, to receipt everything and check all the money and bank the money and take the pressure off the committee again. If any local clubs are listening to me now, the advice I would give any local club, and I've given it to Lawn, but they don't listen now. I know salary caps are being cut, but if a local club has got a salary cap of $100,000 and pay players that sort of money, they also need to find some way of appointing some sort of an administrator, whether that's full-time or part-time, to take the pressure off the board or the committee or whatever you want to call it. Football's got to that level now. There's so much work now needs to be done on computer. There's so much player registration, memberships, salary caps, point system, sponsors, the list goes on and on and on. And I mean, I've got that many stakeholders I have to deal with in my job. And local clubs deal with a lot of people. So if I give any advice, and I'm not going to go on the committee of the Lawn Football Club, I can tell you that, because I've done the stint at Bowen Heads. But if someone asks me to help, I'll always help. Yep. But if any people out there in local clubs, if they can, are listening and want to take some advice, you need to, if you're going to go and pay a player $500, surely you can pay an administrator $500 to do work around the club to make your club better and to take the pressure off the committee so they don't get burnt out after 2 or 3 years, because they will get burnt out. Mm. And there are some great people that work in local footy, and some of the better clubs I know go down that path. But I think that's something that's got to be looked at, because when dealing with the AFL and AFL Bowen and everything else that comes through a local club system, there's a hell of a lot of work for people to do.
Mick, you haven't shied away from the fact that your relationship with the Cats hasn't been great over the journey. Where's the bridge there? Has it been mended to a point? I know you won the RJ Hickey Award going back 4 or 5 years ago, but will we see you back there watching Cats games? Past players catching up with the contemporaries of your era.
Yeah, the best way I explain, King, is that when I was growing up, my preference would have been I was a drummer. So, I used to play in bands and all that sort of stuff. Not any great bands, but
Yep.
probably my dream job would have been the drummer in David Bowie's band. And if you look behind me, that's actually a commissioned painting I had done of his last album, which is called Black Star. And those letters behind, if you look at the album or you look up the album, the name Bowie is spelled out from a star. Okay, so I've got a real interest in music. So that would have been my first preference. Coming from Warrnambool, I was always mad on surfing, and there's a legendary friend of mine, Wayne Lynch, who was one of the pioneers of surfing and changed surfing completely. Everyone talks about Kelly Slater, who's 11-time world champion, and he's the world's greatest ever surfer. But Wayne Lynch completely changed surfing. Excuse me, I shouldn't be going.
There's David Bowie right there. Bit of rebel. I was going to say probably quite an apt song for you, Michael.
Well, I was a bit of a rebel, but I'm too old for that now. So the surfing, if I'd been able to be a top level surfer, that would have been. Look, I played football, basically because I was good at it. I was a good athlete, and I could play football, so that's the path I went down. But I've never been a footy head. Okay, I struggled at various times during my career to stay on track, and people would tell you that I had a 15-year career, and if we were playing at the MCG as we did in 1980 versus Richmond, and there's 90,000 there, or the preliminary final the same year at Waverley Park when there's 75,000 there, I would play well. And this is not being egotistical. I would be in the best players, and I would, every chance to be best on the ground, because I was excited about football when it was a big game and it was, a big crowd and all those sorts of things. And I struggle with football, keeping on track sometimes with the drudgery of training, and also if you went to the Western Oval and it was a wet, terrible day and there was 8,000 people standing there, normally I wouldn't play all that well. Do you know what I mean? Because I just didn't have that motivation. Now, that improved in me as I got older, but particularly improved in me as I became captain of the Geelong Football Club. In your career, you obviously become more professional. But what hurt me a little bit was my consistency, particularly in my probably first 8 years. But and it improved as I got older. Now, in my life, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way, I've never ever looked back. I've always sort of looked forward. There were a few testy times towards the end of my career. Like I had a very ordinary relationship, I must say, with John Devine. And look, I wish him all the best. I know he's quite ill at the moment in Tasmania, and I wish him all the best. And John and I saw myself as a modern football person, and John hadn't been in football for a long time, and he was very old-fashioned in his views. And I would have loved to finish my career as captain of Geelong, but that didn't happen. He sacked me, but I still stayed playing with the club.
Yep.
I was still loyal to the club. I had offers to go to Richmond, offers to go to Collingwood on numerous occasions, but I stayed at Geelong. And probably the thing that would kept you there was that there wasn't the money in football in those days. You're going to go really to Melbourne for an extra $10,000? Probably not. These days you'll get an offer and you'll go to Melbourne for an extra $400,000. Well, if it was now, I probably would. But yeah, when I left Geelong, rightly or wrongly, I was interviewed for the coaching job when Malcolm Blight got it, and he should have got it. I was asked by Ken Gannon, would I be interested in being assistant coach, and I should have said yes if Malcolm Blight would have allowed it. But with a big ego at the end of your football career, you said no, you don't want me as coach. I'll go and coach Werribee. You know what I mean? So yeah, I've got to admit I made some bad decisions. When the job came up the second time, Gary Ayres got it, and I thought I should have got it, but Gary was the heir apparent to Malcolm Blight, as he was when he was at Adelaide, and Gary Ayres is a great fella. So at the same time, then they had a football operations job that they started, and I still remember going to Rex Gorell's in the boardroom and meeting with Gary Ayres for probably an hour and a half, trying to convince him that I was the man to take the job. But him knowing that I also tried to get the coach's job, he probably thought it wasn't a great move for him to have me as football ops. And look, to be honest, it would have been a good move because I just wanted to work at the football club. It didn't matter to me whether I was coach or footy ops. I just really had a passion because I loved the club to work there. So I missed that opportunity. And there was a couple of others a bit later on when they did the Mark Thompson review and with Gary Davidson and all that sort of stuff, when it's been documented that I was approached by a certain board member and promised the job and I didn't get it. And after that occasion, I was pretty disappointed, if not bitter. But since then, I've had conversations with Frank Costa and Brian Cook, and they've invited me back to the club. Bobby Gartland's done a lot of work with me. I've given him all my father's memorabilia, all my memorabilia, because I'm only allowed to keep a couple of things here at home with my wife, and that's all I want. So Bobby's got all that stuff at his museum to put in the Geelong Museum. But look, I'll be honest with you, Kingy. I'm not the sort of person that wants to go to the football, to tell you the truth. I'm happy to sit here and watch it on the TV. So my biggest thing is, and I still support Geelong, and I hope Geelong win the premiership this year. I'm an ex-Geelong player. My father played in 2 premierships. So I'm a Geelong person. What happens at football clubs is it's not the football club's fault. It's individuals at certain times might rub you up the wrong way. So, whether you have a bad relationship with the coach or one of the administrators or someone on the board makes a promise they don't keep, those things happen. But there's no issue with the Geelong Football Club. It's personalities at certain times, and they're not there anymore. So, I don't go to the football. I'd rather watch it on the TV. And when I watch it on the TV, I'm basically watching the ex-Falcons players. I'm watching Sam Walsh play for Carlton, or, Luke Gallows at Geelong. I'm very proud of the fact at the moment that when Geelong pick their final side coming up this week, that there probably will be 8, 9 or 10 ex-Falcons in that side.
Correct.
So that's fantastic for us. Not only have they drafted our players, but during the trading, the players that have gone away, like Paddy Dangerfield or Gary Ablett or Luke Dalhouse, Jack Stephen, have been drafted to other clubs. When they've had the opportunity during the trade, they've brought the players back to the club. And that's a great thing to do in Geelong because of the lifestyle. Do you want to stay in Melbourne, or do you want to come back to the surf coast and live in Moggs Creek like Paddy Dangerfield does and build a beautiful house, or in Torquay like Lockie Henderson does? So it's a good sell to Geelong. So that's been a great thing that Geelong, they've drafted their players, but they've also brought them back through the trade. So, I'll be watching Geelong on Thursday night. And, obviously very interested in Geelong and hoping they do well. But my main interest is watching those 10 Falcons players. Hopefully they're in the side. Lockie Henderson, Gary Rowan, Gary Ablett, who else we got there? I said Gary Rowan, Paddy Dangerfield, etc.
Jed Hughes.
Jed Hughes, Tom Stewart. So Jack Henry. It's fantastic watching that. And to be messed up with Geelong's great. Now, I will say this, King, I'll put it online. Geelong, when you line them up, are the most talented team in the AFL. All right, so if you line up, if people there get the Richmond side tomorrow or Thursday, from back line to forward line, and put the Geelong side next to it, back line to forward line, not the other way around, not on their opponents.
Yep.
You go through the lines. If Geelong aren't a more talented side individually than Richmond or any other side in the comp, I'll go who. And they've been fairly unlucky the last few years not to win a premiership. Last year they got Richmond at halftime. Tommy Hawkins was suspended, and Richmond get up and beat them. If they had won that preliminary final, they would have won the premiership by 15 goals.
Yep.
So that's very disappointing for people. But Geelong, what I'm saying is categorically, Geelong are the most talented team individually in the AFL. What we hope happens this year is that Geelong, and look, Chris Scott and everyone's going to try and do it. You don't go out not to play as the best team, but if they can put it together and play as the best team like they have, well, they will win the premiership.
Yep.
The only thing I see going against them this year is the fact that the games aren't going to be at GMHBA Stadium or the MCG. So they've got Port, who they beat last time, but Port, they've got them in Adelaide, okay? And they do grow a leg there. If they play Brisbane, in Brisbane, that's a hard one. If they play West Coast in Perth, that's a really hard game too. So the fixture and the draw may go against them, but talent-wise, there's no doubt that they should win the premiership and see Gary Ablett off. And if Joel Selwood's got another couple of years and Paddy Dangerfield and all those great players, they get another, and Tommy Hawkins get another premiership under their belt before they do get a bit top-heavy in the age bracket.
Last question, Mick. Wherever the Geelong Falcons are round 1 next year and they're allowed to have crowds, will you be there?
Look, not sure. I think I'd be a bit more inclined if Tommy invited me. And look, let me just speak briefly on Tommy Longden. I've sort of mentored Tommy for a long time. Now, I'm not saying, we talk to each other at time, but Tommy came from the Murray Bush Range and called the Cannons, and when he played for Vic Country, he was there, and I mentored him. I still remember, and he can tell you this. All the players had a day off and went, to the big shopping centres and all that. Well, we went to a shopping centre and watched Star Wars together. sat next to each other and watched Star Wars. And that's a long time ago. When he finished with Geelong, he actually, I had a couple of meetings with him down at the Highton shopping centre, and he asked me, what he should do, and he had a couple of offers on the table, and I said, well, look, Tom, people retire every year, mate. You've probably got a two-year window to do something, and he went out to Cotton On and did some leadership stuff himself. And then I met him again when the Call to Cannons job came up. And I said, well, come on, we've had this conversation before. You want to get involved in footy or not? Footy jobs are hard to get. These jobs are really good jobs. Most people would look at my job and think I've got one of the best jobs in the world. It is a great job with what you do, but there's still a lot of challenges and stakeholders you've got to deal with. It's no different to what, as I said, Brian Cook does at Geelong. There's a lot of people you've got to work with. So, I met Tommy and helped him through the processes with the Calder job, and he got that. So Tommy, now with 2 years' experience, is coming with Paul Corrigan to the Falcons, which is fantastic. I'm just really thrilled that there's two really good people coming to the club to keep it going. So I'd be more inclined, I think, with the programs, boys and girls, to go down and see the players at a training night. Now, you've been down there yourself, King. Like on training nights, we invite people down to come and talk to the players. And before the premiership in 2017, again, we had Luke Hodge come down and talk to the players, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yep.
And we had Dom Gleeson, because they both played in the 2000 premiership. So we love people coming down. I usually get up and do my spiel, and then Dean Pearce might say 2 words. He doesn't say that much. Luke Daffy will do his bit. The high performance manager will speak, and then we'll get a guest speaker to come in and just wish them all the best. So I'd be a bit more inclined, I think, if I got invited to go to training rather than the game, which is a distraction. And they've got the NAB app now. You can watch all the games on that app on the TV, just like the AFL app. But I'd be more inclined to sit back and watch it. But I will say this: we set up this year a fantastic draft squad. Our 17-year-olds were unbelievable last year, but they were just a bit young and outgunned. And look, we had 15 to 20 players that we thought had a chance of being drafted this year. Now, you're not going to ever get that amount done, but on a normal year this year, I think we would have got 6, 7 or 8. Yep. Now, that's not going to happen because of the reduced draft, but luckily all those players, boys and girls, will be rolled to next year. So Tommy and Paul, after the draft this year, I'll assure them that they're going to have a good side. They will have a good side next year, and Geelong Falcons will have a good draft this year, and I reckon because of hopefully the number increase next year, they'll have a better draft next year.
Yep. Michael, you've done a wonderful job for a heck of a long time. You've been a great supporter of K-Rock, obviously part of the K-Rock family, as we know, for a number of years in the experts chair with our footy coverage, but you've been more than open with K-Rock football over the journey, and the access has been unfettered, which has been fantastic to players, yourself and coaches. And we wanted to pay tribute in our way, and we thought, well, a chat like this would be a great chance to be able to get you to reflect on your time with the Falcons, but also your time in football as well. We really appreciate you giving up some of that time from your palatial abode down there in Lorne, and we look forward to catching up with you in retirement and being able to solve the problems of the world without having to worry about, I suppose, having to toe the party line sometimes, Mick.
Oh, well, we work for any organisation. You've got to toe the party line, and the AFL, look, it's a difficult organisation because you get so much publicity, King. Yes, everyone's prying, including you. So, when you work for the AFL, you've got to deal with footy ops, integrity, the accountancy, budgets, and also HR and legal. So there's a lot of people you've got to tick off on. So, that's just the way that it is. And the AFL weren't keen on me talking to any media until after they finished their reset process, which was last Friday, and they'd appointed people. So that's all good. And as I say, I want to celebrate what we've done. And what happens in the future is up to the AFL, but very supportive of Tommy Lonergan and Paul Corrigan getting those jobs. And, I just want to thank the media. I've obviously got a lot of people in the media that I deal with, and a lot of those have come through the Geelong Eddie and K-Rock and gone on to great careers. And Brian Taylor's a mate of mine, of course, and that's why I get a mention each week as Mickey Turner's Footy Factory. But I want to thank particularly local media, Geelong Eddie and K-Rock, for being so supportive of our program. And I think we've been pretty welcoming when you come down. But both organisations have been really supportive of the program, and they've given the Falcons a chance to have their own brand. I mean, Geelong Football Club are a big brand, but the Falcons are a brand of their own. Even the Geelong Football Club will tell you that. So that's been really good. And you've emceed our functions at our annual dinners and all those sorts of things. So, just want to thank the Geelong community in general, particularly the local clubs that have been so supportive, and they have. They probably don't always agree with what I do. The local schools don't agree with what I do all the time, whether it be Geelong College, Geelong Grammar or St Joey's or Christian College, who a lot of our players come from. But everyone's been very supportive, the media have, and particularly you. But people have just got to remember, when you're in a position like this and you're dealing with youth, they go to school to reach their full potential. And if they're elite footballers and they come into our programs, our job is to help them reach their full potential. So we make decisions in the best interest, and this is my mantra, of number one, the player, number two, their parents, because they've got to drive them around, and of course our staff, the impact it has on them. But everyone in life has got talent, and if you've got a talent, you have got a duty to pursue that talent, and people have got to support it and allow them to reach their full potential. Now, sometimes you get blockages for that, and the people who try and block it will know who they're talking about. But if someone's a great gymnast, they go to the gym in Melbourne, and footballers are no different. If you're an elite talent, you've got the right to reach your full potential, and that's always been my mantra. And hopefully, it's paid its price over the course.
Mick, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to catching up with you soon.
Good on you, Kingy. Thanks, buddy.